This is what everyone knows Newcastle for, football. But I'm going to tell you about something much, much better.
They want to know about Islam, we'll give them da'wah. They want to know what a Muslim does, we'll give them da'wah. When they want to hate on...
In 2012, I was a non-Muslim who walked into my local masjid. I met the brothers there from IDC. This was a team of brothers who told me about the message of Islam in detail. I took my shahada. The brothers, they didn't just leave me there. You know, they supported me, provided me new Muslim classes, and after all these years, I became the head of the new Muslim department here at IDC, teaching other new Muslims, supporting them and mentoring them, just like I was supported. IDC is not just your typical charity. We have our Islamic awareness stalls engaging with non-Muslims in our local city centre and answering all their questions about Islam, public events and exhibitions for non-Muslims to come learn about Islam, masjid visits for the local community, school visits teaching non-Muslim kids and staff about Islam. We visit the elderly and spend time with them regularly to give them companionship, feeding the homeless every single week, giving them hot meals and advice. We make the children smile every single year by visiting them in the hospitals and giving them gifts. So many people have taken their shahada with us.
Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
Because of this, we then provide new Muslim classes for them and support them on their journey. Please, please, please give whatever you can. Do you know how much you can afford? Better than myself. Some of us can give £10, some of us can give £500, and every single person that accepts Islam, you will get a portion of that reward. The Prophet, peace be upon him, he said that charity does not decrease our wealth. So brothers and sisters, believe in those words and give for the sake of Allah. And Allah, inshallah, will increase it for you. Click the button and donate now.
They want to know about Islam, we'll give them da'wah. They want to know what a Muslim does, we'll give them da'wah. When they want to hate on our deen, we'll give them da'wah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're watching Newcastle Fast FM. This is the Late Show Live with your host Abu Tayyib, and we have two very special guests this evening for tonight's program. First of all, apologies for the slightly late start, but alhamdulillah, we're here. We have two older brothers, inshallah, two of the pioneers in the da'wah, as I call them. Yeah, we have our older brother AbdulHaq Baker. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
And we have our other brother Alyas Karmani. Assalamu alaikum, Alyas.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Again, yeah?
AbdulHaq, you're looking beautiful, mashallah. Lockdown is treating you well.
Mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. Allah preserve you. Allah increase you, inshallah. And look, Abu Tayyib, you know when you say pioneers, okay, you know, I have to say this, and this is not to break my brother's back, yeah, but behind the scenes, people don't know what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
In terms of influencing, in terms of change, in terms of lobbying, in terms of fighting. I'm telling you, fighting policymakers, decision makers for the benefit of the Muslims. You don't see it. And I'm not talking about at the local level. I'm talking at parliamentary level, United Nations level, senior. We're at tables that nobody goes to.
Yeah.
And we're fighting. And we don't say Allah is we do this for the sake of Allah Ta'ala and only for the pleasure of Allah. But you know, AbdulHaq has been the first. I followed in his footsteps. Back after 9/11, you know, AbdulHaq took a stance on issues that was happening in our mosques where people were promoting Khawarij ideas.
Yeah. Well, we're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss that, yeah, because
I'm not going to say any more about it. I get jacked. You know, I'm jacked every night, man. I'm jacked up.
Well, you know, the beautiful thing is both of you brothers, mashallah, tabarakallah, may Allah preserve you both, because you both have pioneered in this thing, not just on a local level, but international level as well. So we're going to discuss that in a moment. Let's introduce both of you first. Let me start with AbdulHaq. Let's let the viewers, the audience, get to know a little bit about him first. So AbdulHaq, let's start with you, bro. Tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us about, you know, your upbringing, your background before Islam, because of course you're a revert to Islam as well. So let's talk about before Islam. Let's have a little synopsis, if you like.
First of all, Jazakallah for having me on, and again, Ilyas has been too kind, and he knows when I first came to the deen, and we saw him and the brothers like him. They were pioneers in the early 90s as well, mashallah. Jazakallah khair. Before I came to Islam, I was a regular South Londoner with my colleagues, my friends, which you would call a gang now, I suppose. We were a good bunch of individuals. We were streetwise, street smart, loved doing what everybody else did. Yes, we got into some of the more mischievous sides of things, gang violence and drugs and the usual run of the mill. But we had one thing that I respect is that a lot of us, everyone in my group, my posse, if I can use that phrase, we were all from single parent families. And we gravitated towards each other and became a family in ourselves. But one thing I want to give accolade to is that our mothers, they placed values in us that even though we were doing things that many things they didn't know about and would not have subscribed to or endorsed, we still had an ethic. And I think that that was a spiritual anchoring. So when Islam came to us, and we'd already discarded Christianity. I went to Roman Catholic school, had to go church, confession, gave that all up for the street road life, but we still had a spiritual yearning and anchoring, and we were not shy to discuss that. And some would call it consciousness, black consciousness, whatever it was, but it took us in a direction where within the same year, the majority of my posse, of my peeps, as I say, had embraced Islam. Now, I thank Allah for that, because some said family, my wife now, who's been with me for many years before Islam as well, my mum and everyone, they said I would have been dead by 30. And a number of us would have either been in prison or in jail, or in prison or dead, by the age of 30, because of the hedonistic lifestyle that we were leading. So I was working in the legal profession when I came to the Deen. I was the only black guy. I was seen as a bit of a novelty, as a fee earner, over 200 of my own cases, going to court, instructing barristers, and everyone being surprised that someone from such a background could move in such a direction. And the reason why it's a big subject, but the main reason why I came to Islam is I remember not being given an ultimatum, but being asked by one of my Codis, Aslam. He was going to the mosque the next day, and he asked me, "We believe in God?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "We believe in the angels and all these things as Christians." "Yes." And he said, "What will you say if you die tomorrow and we know that we're going to stand before Allah on the day of judgment?" And I didn't move for the whole night, from the time he left my home, about 10 o'clock at night. And I sat right the way through to about 12 hours. My wife came down. She saw I hadn't moved. The only time I moved was to go to the bathroom, have a shower. I said, "I've got to go." And she didn't know where I was going, but she knew there was an epiphany moment that was there. And I said that to myself. I'd seen a few friends died. We'd come close to death on a number of occasions. And we knew that there was the ultimate accountability to God, to Allah. So for me, with the inquiries I was doing about Islam, the thing that got me was the monotheism. That God, Allah was one, and that all the prophets that I'd learned about in Christianity, the Muslims believed in, but with a more noble description than the ones that I knew from Christianity. So that brought me to Islam, and I will say, quite frankly, it was a lifesaver.
MashaAllah. I mean, it's interesting because you wrote an article, if I remember correctly. I read it in I think it was The Guardian, about it was very specific for South London, but one of the main reasons why people from your community came to Islam was partly because of what you mentioned about Tawheed and things like that. But I think the biggest thing that stood out for me in that article was because of the brotherhood, because of the sisterhood, because of the the bonds of brotherhood that you find in Islam, which you may not find in other communities. Now, expand upon that a little bit, because that article was really enlightening for me.
Very good point. My posse, should I say, were mainly black and white, and we had just the one Asian individual amongst us who was the one who, when we started talking about monotheism, gave us directed me to the Quran, mashallah tabarakallah, the English rendition of that. But when we came to Islam and we saw the multiplicity of cultures and what Islam was saying, what was being said in Surah Hujurat. So I first was exposed to Surah Ikhlas, which still remains my favorite surah today, and then Surah Fatiha. And then when we started meeting different Muslims, remember, my world was not amongst the South Asian community. It was amongst all the other communities. But when we came in and saw that multiplicity, and the Surah Hujurat said that the best of you is the one with the most taqwa. And we saw Muslims implementing that by and large. We saw individuals embracing us and not being concerned about our background, our ethnicity, the side of racism and cultural aspects. That's another subject we can go into. But for me, the sense of brotherhood, and I touched upon this, and I don't want to break his back, but I remember when we started moving in bigger circles, and I met Alyas, and some of us saw Alyas, and we saw how he would conduct it, and he was South London. He lived one road away from my family home. He went to Ernest Bevin. My parents didn't let me go to Ernest Bevin. They said I was too violent. They needed to move me out of Tooting and send me somewhere else, which they then changed me to a Roman Catholic school because I had the same problems when I went to Henry Thornton in Clapham. But the fact that I saw Alyas, South London, the warmth that he and other brothers showed us, and they saw we had a yearning for learning, and they weren't preachy about it. They were part of us, and it felt like they'd been a part of us for a number of years. And that made us gravitate. And the thing that bonded us with the brotherhood was the Sunnah, the brotherhood from the Sunnah, the understanding of how to interact and engage with new Muslims, established Muslims. So that sense of brotherhood for me replaced the tension that we used to feel as a posse when we moved around London. Now, being from South London had a reputation wherever we went, North London, East London, out of London. But within London itself, now it's postcodes. It wasn't as microcosmic as that. But moving around South London, if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, there was violence. I found that moving around different communities of Muslims, like when Alyas invited me up to Bradford, and I saw people open their homes for me. I saw uncles and aunties come out and, is he a new Muslim? Let's feed him. Let's do this. One of the things South Asian community, they feed. I learned Asian food like anything when I was with Alyas. So the hospitality and the brotherhood that was there, and going that extra mile, because not any tangible benefit, but for the sake of Allah. And understanding that term, for the sake of Allah, my brother, it's for the sake of Allah. And when we heard that they're doing this for God, for Allah, that sense of brotherhood for me still remains, despite all the tensions, internecine fighting and everything like that. The sense of brotherhood is in Islam, and we're seeing it in Ramadan. We're seeing it being shown to the wider society with the charitable work that's been done to non-Muslim food banks and everything like that, is second to none. It remains second to none. Love for the sake of Allah and brotherhood under Islam for the sake of Allah. There's no other faith or way of life that can replicate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to bring Alyas into this next, inshallah, because I remember a very strong statement. I agree with you 100%. You know, with one of the, and I had a show with another gentleman, another brother on last week, I think it was, and one of the things that we were talking about was one of the most beautiful things about this deen is the diversity, is the brotherhood and the sisterhood. You know, it's one of the things that is for me, it's one of the most strongest points of this deen, if you like, after Tawheed, of course. And I remember I've spoken to Alyas many times. He's my boy from, you know, we are tight anyway. So we've had this conversation so many times, and it's very true. Back in the 90s, when we were involved in the dawah back in the 90s, you know, it was a completely different ball game anyway, as you both know. And we made this comment, and I totally agree with it when he said this. Back in them days, we had less access to knowledge, as in books and things that were translating to English, but we had more brotherhood, right? And I can testify to this. Now we have more access to knowledge and information, but I feel we have less brotherhood compared to what it was like in the 90s, right? So in the 90s, I could literally drive to any city in the UK, right? Literally, I used to do that from Newcastle. We had no Islamic shops here. We had no Brothers Upon the Sunnah. We had very little here in Newcastle, yeah? So I literally had to drive from Newcastle to London for one class. Imagine that. When Sheikh Bilal Phillips used to come at Al-Muntar, I used to drive from here to there just to attend his classes, right? And I knew no matter which city I went to, I knew there were brothers who were gonna, all I needed was I was broke as a joke at that time as well. All I needed was enough petrol money to get there and back. And I knew my sleeping accommodation would be sorted, the food would be sorted. I didn't have to worry about anything else. Yeah. And that was it. I knew that I just have to get there, learn the knowledge, and come back. That's all I had to worry about. So this was back in the days, and Alyas was one of those brothers who, again, you know, set the example. And this is why we say that knowledge is not enough. You know, your manners play a huge part. Your akhlaq plays a huge part in bringing people closer to the Sunnah. So when we saw this whole SP thing that was going on, and I know you've done, we're going to touch upon that as well shortly. You know, the manners pushed or the bad manners pushed a lot of people away from the Sunnah because of the bad manners. So let me introduce Alyas now, because
Bismillah, alhamdulillah,
tell us for the audience, for the audience, yeah. Tell us a little bit about your background. You know, what you've studied, what you've educated in, and what you specialize in.
And look, Abu Tayyib, before I do that, I want to touch on what you've just mentioned as well. And the first crime committed on this earth is when Shaitan enticed Cain to kill his brother Abel. You know, Qabil killed Abil, and introduced, murder and fratricide to this earth. And thereafter, Shaitan, he knows that how to destroy brotherhood. He's the expert in destroying brotherhood. Divide and conquer is his ultimate strategy. And I've got to say, what AbdulHaq describes, what you describe in the 90s, that spirit, that real spirit, I could say almost like the Sahaba spirit of fraternity, of unity, of solidarity, of purpose, in the 90s, early 1990, I found my family. It's as simple as that. I found my family, and it was a beautiful family. It was a universal family. We came from everywhere and all backgrounds, and we were just so together. And, a little voice in me saying, this can't last either, okay? For the simple reason that Shaitan won't allow it to last. That inevitably egos will get in the way, and brother will turn on brother, na'udhu billah. And tragically that's happened. And that fractured the da'wah. And I still see it happening. I see us going through almost like a cyclical process. Okay, for those of us who have been long enough in terms of having a retrospective in da'wah, we still see elements of that hizbiyah, that partisanship, that brother turning on brother, people with egos, people who are empire builders, people who are concerned about their own status and position. And that, unfortunately, is fracturing us. The verse in the Quran, Allah Ta'ala says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ إِخْوَانًا. And remember the ni'mah that Allah bestowed upon you. You were enemies of one another. Allah joined your hearts and made you into brothers. This is a great blessing that Allah joined us. And we experienced that feeling in the 90s of Allah joining our hearts from such disparate, diverse backgrounds, and joining our hearts. And the brotherhood was amazing. It was addictive and infectious and amazing. And inevitably Shaitan came between the whole process. But alhamdulillah, there's still a lot of us who still have that spirit, who still have that love, and still have that connection. So alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
My own background.
We've got a comment here, Alyas. Yeah, you got to read this comment here. Yeah. You guys are talking about some of the old school days of the dawah. Was that when you had cassette tapes? Yes,
Absolutely.
brother, that was the cassette tape days. Yeah, they were the good old days. Trust me.
And you know what? We would cherish.
You're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't just cassette tapes. We were poor. We didn't have money in those days, so we had to share cassette tapes, bro. Honestly, okay. And these cassette tapes, they would fall out. They would have like bad recordings. But I'm telling you, you had a group of brothers surrounding a tape recorder, listening to that. And you know what? Taking notes.
Yes.
Honestly, we were so hungry for knowledge.
Yeah.
That obviously we were learning from the elders.
Can you hear me
Sorry?
now?
Yeah, I can hear you, bro.
Yeah. Just to jump in with what Ilyas is saying. Beside me here, I've got 600 cassettes from the Brixton days and the lectures. I've got them here. And that's why one of the reasons I decided to do Chronicles of UK Salafism, because the notes, as Ilyas said, we would sit 2 hours cramped, enjoying the atmosphere, writing our notes down, comparing our notes, going and pondering over our notes. The attention span we had then is unlike today because of the social media and everything like that. So what Ilyas is saying, and the individual asked, yes, about the cassettes, he's absolutely right. And like maybe I'd give Ilyas when we got the tape machines, Elias would say, I'm coming to get some tapes from you. We'd run off those tapes. He would go up, mass produce them if he's got his machine. This is how it was in those days.
It was, yeah. We had the same thing.
You know what I was saying? Cut and paste was literally cut and paste. It was literally cut and paste, bro. Honestly,
yeah. You know, in Newcastle we used to have that machine. Yeah, so I used to drive down to Birmingham or London, buy the tapes, bring them back to Newcastle, have the machine. But you used to record 3 at a time. Yeah, so you put the master copy in, and then 3, record them, and then literally had to go through the whole thing. Around, do the same thing again, and then we used to distribute them all for free with the brothers. Yeah, so they were the good old days, I have to say. Now we touched upon the 90s, right? We touched upon Brixton, AbdulHaq. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that, because you were the chairman of Brixton Masjid, right? So tell us about. And I remember going to Brixton Masjid back in the days. It was an absolutely, buzzing, bouncing. The atmosphere was something else. Used to love coming to Brixton Masjid, even though it was a 5-hour drive for me, or 5.5 hours, 6-hour drive sometimes, and it was worth the trip. Yeah, because you would come there, you'd get knowledge, you'd have the brotherhood with some of the old school brothers, and then you would go and get your halal chicken, right? Your halal fried chicken, right? So tell us a little bit about the Brixton Masjid days.
Brixton, that's where I went and took my Shahada. It's the first mosque I'd ever attended. I didn't know a mosque or what it looked like and everything. And within 3 years, 4 years of being Muslim, there was some internal strife amongst us, because we had the Murabitun who were declaring that this was what the way of the masjid, and the whole community, not just the young Salafis that were growing and developing in the community, but the whole community rejected the Murabitun ethos very quickly. So we were elected in an era which ushered in the dawah that we were upon. And because of some of the elders who were around me, who had been teaching us Salafiyah from the beginning, but without putting a label on it, we then ushered in an era of, it was an amazing era, because it was an inclusive one. The mosque became unified with its call. There wasn't a multiplicity. You didn't have the Shia coming in, the Nation of Islam, anyone else now coming in with multifaceted beliefs. It was one belief according to the Sunnah, and that wasn't rammed down people's throats. We opened up to the community. Not everyone who attended was Salafi, but they knew the ethos was Salafi. And I think the excitement was such that we wanted to emulate a community base that was close to the Prophet ﷺ's time. So the masjid was always open. We had individuals coming in, immigrants coming in. They could find a place to stay at night. We worked with the shelter companies when they didn't have housing or anything like that. And the buzz, I think, was because of you brothers, because everyone was a stakeholder. Everyone wanted to be there. There was the element of learning. There was the element of going out to the wider community, and we really stuck up for each other. And I think that was the thing that resonated. And as you know, from the conferences that came about, we got the building next door. We started a school there, and we used to Brixton, Gresham Road, and around Brixton. They used to see every year thousands of Muslims in a particular summer, and this had a really good and positive impact on the wider community, because they saw we were part of them whilst we were Orthodox. And I think for historic purposes, it's important to note that we were the first convert African, Caribbean and white convert-led mosque in London. If not the UK, that was upon Salafiyah. That was upon Salafiyah as well. Yeah. So I think that was an achievement, and those exciting times was because of the contribution of everyone. And also, there wasn't this hegemonic attitude and approach of controlling dawah. We were a local community mosque. We helped our brothers wherever they were. If you called us up and said, come to Leeds, we're having an event, even if there were some other issues, there was some disputes, racism or whatever, we did not see ourselves as a hegemonic, we are going to run the dawah, we are going to control the dawah. We were just part of a satellite of community, and we engaged on that basis.
Yeah, and one of the things that really stood out for me was whenever I used to come to that masjid, it was, it was the first time I saw a largely majority revert population congregation. That was the first time I saw that. you know, because in Newcastle, obviously, we're a small community compared to other places, yeah. But you know, it was amazing to see that a huge part of the congregation were reverts to Islam, and it was revert led as well. So this had a completely different impact.
This was a very important thing. This was really important. This was an important learning curve for us.
Yes.
You know, especially growing up in many places, seeing what I call a very South Asian dominated Islam and masjid infrastructure. Also seeing very much an Arab dominated masjid infrastructure as well. It was important to see this. This is pioneering. That you know, converts to Islam doing it for themselves, having the autonomy, sovereignty, and leading themselves, and through that actually providing real guidance, which was contextualized within that lived experience. I think that was very important, and it was a learning experience for us to allow that, to nurture that, and to grow that, and rather than try to control it because of entitlement and a subtle racism as well, that, oh, we are the born Muslims, you are the convert Muslims, you've got to be under our, you could say, authority and guidance and support. No, it was about partnership. It was about ta'awun al-birr, cooperation. It wasn't about domination, alhamdulillah. And I think this is very powerful.
The beautiful thing is, it was upon the sunnah. That was the most beautiful thing about the whole thing. And this is one of the reasons that when we set up our masjid, the Newcastle Central Masjid here back in 2002, I think it was, we emulated the same model. So even in our masjid today, we have it's a big masjid. We've got a big masjid project going on right now, as you know, Alyas, yeah? And even today, we have more than 33 different nationalities in our Jama'ah, in our congregation. And it's also in the management as well, not just in the congregation. So it's not an Asian management structure either. It's a very diverse management structure, which has filtered down to the congregation. More than 33 or 35 different ethnicities pray in our masjid. And that is, it was based upon the same line of thinking as what we witnessed in Brixton Masjid. So that's what I said. It's pioneering. Yeah, we've got another comment from Muslim BB here, which says,
just on this
yes,
point. You know, alhamdulillah, again, one of the pioneering things you've done is obviously Black History Month and introducing an Islamic aspect into Black History Month, alhamdulillah.
Islam and Black history.
And one of the things that people don't realize about Black history is that Islam came into Africa before it came into Asia. And the Islamic heritage of Africa is so rich. It's you know, within 30 years, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were in North Africa. You know, people have to realize this. Islam's African heritage is enormous. However, somehow it's become marginalized. And you know, we don't see it, you know, certainly in the UK kind of mainstream, that, you know, that this is, and what we've done is that we've pushed it and compartmentalized. So we have the African mosque and we have the Asian mosque, etc., etc. And again, what we represented was unity upon sunnah, okay, and actually recognition of that rich heritage as well.
Absolutely. And I think AbdulHaq, I was going to ask you, I think one of the things is, you know, like I mentioned about that diversity, and it's one of the reasons why when I certainly started practicing the deen, we ran away from that cultural element. You know, we moved away from all of that and that cultural dominance and that cultural, you know, like you said, it's that what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like entitlement. It's entitlement, that self-entitlement. And this is why a lot of people gravitated to the Sunnah and the Salafi manhaj, because it transcended all of that. You know, when you had certain other groups and sects, it was very much upon ethnic lines, right? A lot of the time. But when we came to the Sunnah, when the da'wah got increased, and this is what I'm going to ask AbdulHaq next, in the 90s, it's why the Salafi movement was so successful, because we moved away from the cultural aspects of what we thought Islam was, and then we came to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So tell us a little bit about that, AbdulHaq, about some of the discourse on that.
I think what was good, and we've got to acknowledge this, it's very rarely acknowledged, and that is that the South Asian community and brothers like yourselves, I saw some of the sacrifices that you had to go through with the more traditional cultural aspects of your communities in embracing the Sunnah, and them seeing these black brothers, these white brothers, and suddenly, no, we are one with them. And your parents understood that this was what Islam represented, but they were so entrenched, many of them, in a cultural paradigm. On our side now, we had to grapple with those elders who were looking at a Pan-African type of understanding of Islam as well. And we were trying to navigate in between that. And I would say in the formative stages, to avoid both of those extremes, if you want, in a soft E in that element, we went down what we thought was the Sunnah, and it was a Saudiized Gulf Arab sort of understanding with regards to address, appearance, and everything like that. Some of us started moving away from that. Unfortunately, some haven't, where we realized, no, the diversity in Islam does not have to be dictated by particular cultural backdrops. When you look at the Sunnah, it can comply and it can conform with whichever cultural paradigm you're within, whichever cultural backdrop that you're within. And seeing that play itself out as we developed as Salafis was very important, and it was very attractive to those who wanted to move away from any cultural dimension that they were in. Not discarding culture, though. Initially, we were talking about discarding culture, and I think that was a mistake from us as Salafis. It's okay to have Pakistani cultural heritage, particular Nigerian, Ghanaian, African. Those of us who didn't come from both backgrounds, we were British street backgrounds. We introduced, I think you could see with the nice trainers, the different types of hats that we were wearing and everything, the peak caps, and mixing that up with the thobe. That was something inherently convert driven, I believe, because we then started finding our own identities that wasn't the Arab side, that wasn't Asian, that wasn't African. It had to be British and convert urban, if I think is a better word, urban led in that instance. So I think that became attractive and attracted everyone from whatever cultural backdrop that you came into. And they saw that I think it was that mosaic was a very attractive and alluring one, because the underpinning of that was adherence to the Sunnah, Tawheed, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There was nothing else there that we were holding on to except that.
And you don't think that that's very true, but you don't think that that can be quite dangerous as well, though, sometimes, in the sense of people, we hear a lot from the Quiliamites, for example, who are talking about a British understanding of Islam, and what they mean by that is a liberal, assimilated, lose your identity type of Islam, right? Which is palatable for whoever. Okay, so I think there's a fine line between the two when we use this type of terminology, that we have to be careful that we make sure we mention that the foundations are upon the Sunnah. And I think that's because obviously the culture, there are some elements of the culture which intertwine with the Sunnah, with Islam, but then there's some parts of the culture which clash with the Sunnah. Right? So I think we have to highlight that point, that not every aspect of the culture can be adopted, or that we run away from it completely. There's a balance between the two.
There's a very simple,
Sunnah, we can accept. Yeah. Sorry, Alyas, go.
Yeah, there's a very simple way to analyze this. Yeah, and there's a very simple tool to use. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَكُمْ أُمَّةٌ وَسِطًا, that we have made you the middle nation between extremes. And that's the way we should always be upon wasitiyya. And AbdulHaq have these discussions all the time, that even our Salafiyya is upon a wasitiyya, because we see people fractured to one extreme of isolation and another one of assimilation. But we're in the middle of being productive members of society, contributing to the society, but maintaining our aqidah, maintaining our ibadah, maintaining our adab and our conduct. So we are confident as British Muslims in that, because our foundation is the Quran and the Sunnah. And it's not about selling out or not about giving up. It's not about assimilating. Allah even says in the Quran, they'll never be pleased. The Prophet says, وَمَنْ تَشَابِهَ بِقَوْمٍ فَهُوَ مِنْهُمْ. Whoever imitates the people is of them. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about the perfect balance. And this is what I see, again, sometimes mistakes being made between the younger generations that are coming forward. They're not learning from our experience and our journey. As we come to a wasitiyya, they seem to be going from pillar to post. They seem to be going from extreme to extreme, frying pan into the fire. And rather than, you know, and look, one of the signs of balanced faith, true iman, is wasitiyya. And you know, the rest of the verse, you know, Allah Ta'ala says, وَلِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ لِلنَّاسِ وَيَكُونُ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. We are witnesses to that. We have to be witnesses, shuhada of wasitiyya. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Adin yusra, the deen is easy. Don't go to extremes. Don't go to these extremes of expression. Just stay on the middle path. And what AbdulHaq is saying is finding the balance between your cultural expression and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, and that's the middle road. Don't assimilate into a foreign culture. That's not your culture. Okay, and think that that's Islam, because it isn't. And that's, you know what I've got to say, this is the beauty of Islam, that it's a multiplicity of cultural expressions. And that's the verse we started off with. Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum sha'uban wa qabaila lita'arafu. We made you into nations and tribes so that you know one another, value one another, recognize that cultural diversity within us. And as Malcolm X rahimahullah, he said when he went on to the Hajj, he said he saw Muslims from all over the world, all united with one purpose, worshipping Rabbil Alameen. That's so powerful. And as it goes, going back to the 90s.
What Ilyas is saying, and I think the key word we're looking at, Abu Tayyib, is entities like Quilliam want to dilute identity. What we are actually saying in actuality, and what we were doing, and it's exactly what Ilyas was explaining there, is that, and you used that key word, our identity was intertwined with who we were and where we came from. It was like a woven part of the fabric, and we were learning that and implementing that. So much so that why did so many individuals who were Muslims, second, third generation, why were they so attracted to Islam? We saw fringe groups like Hezb Tahrir and then becoming Al-Muhajirun. Notice they used to oppose us vehemently. Then suddenly they adopted the mantle, even though they don't, their subscription is a false one, saying we are now Salafis. They shed off the suits and the ties and the women dressing in nice long pleated skirts and whatever, and suddenly started donning what they believed was the Salafi attire or uniform, if you want, for want of a better phrase. So I think that intertwining, that blending of socio-religious orthodoxy was done by none other than the Salafis. And there were others, of course. You had the Deobandi, a lot who were proud of their identity, the Sufi elements. They were doing what they were doing, but bringing it out to mainstream, because the converts, the influx of converts was mainly amongst the Salafi community. And I'm not talking about middle class Sufism and everything like that. We're talking urban. The groundswell was from the urban communities into Salafism. And it's funny, I was speaking to a colleague recently, and he shared some data with me, that he had done some research, Mohammed Hijab actually, and his research showed out of 1,100 the target audience that he interviewed or surveyed, 73% considered them nominal regular Muslims. But what was telling was the next largest number, the percentage, was 20% who considered themselves Salafi Athari. The other percentages were like 1%, 2%, 3%. So when we're talking about Salafi, and I want the viewers and the listeners to understand this, the loudest noises they're hearing about that very hybrid, distorted, disdainful, marginalizing Salafism that people are seeing from some of us who have been very badly behaved, that does not speak to the majority of those from the Salafi communities who are actually within the mainstream, who are actually blending in and participating. They don't belong to no group. They don't belong to no cult. They are just there within their communities as a minority, as a majority in some instances. And it's not that Salafi movement group that you have to adhere to this cult or else you're damned. Unfortunately, in the early stages of our development, many of us had the overzealousness. Sadly, some haven't moved away from that, and it's morphed into this cult, which individuals are hearing so much from because they're relatively established, and they're thinking that that's what Salafiyah stands for, and it isn't.
And they have loud voices. They have the loud voices. Sorry, bro. One thing I just want to add to that, because both of you made some very, very good points there. Number one, the whole idea of Asianizing converts, right? So you have to wear the shalwar kameez, you have to learn Urdu. We've seen that as well, and that's something which is problematic in and of itself. And Arabizing to some extent, I mean, we've got to be a bit careful because there is some level of Arabizing when we start practicing the Sunnah. There has to be because of the language and things like that. But I see what you mean in terms of Arab culturalizing, if you like. Where I think that's the most appropriate way to explain it. But even so, that was one point that we have to remain, try and stay away from that. And partly it's out of ignorance. They don't know any better. That's why. That was all they knew, and that's what they thought Islam was. That's what they went down that road. But there's another element as well, I think, what Ilyas touched upon, which was important to highlight, which is, the youth, the new school, the new members of the Dawah today. Those who weren't there during the 90s, those who came afterward. I think the problem that we see now is, yes, they have the overzealousness, and I think everybody goes through that. I don't think anyone is absent from that. But I think the problem that I've got is when those young brothers are not taking the lessons from the mistakes that we made in the 90s. With the whole refutations and all that sort of stuff. And even today, not taking lessons from the older brothers who are around today, even just getting advice and nasiha from them, to learn from our mistakes. Because in them days, we didn't have older brothers and mentors to keep us on that path. But these brothers do have that. I think that's where my problem lies.
Yeah. And look, I'm actually doing some kind of collaborative work with a number of academics on, and this is across all faiths, by the way, not just Islam. And it's about what we call toxic theology. And I know AbdulHaq as well has done similar stuff on cultist mentalities as well. And there's a strong link between cultism, Hizbiyah, and toxic theology. And look, and that's the tragedy that I think we find that we have, that we've fallen into this toxic theology. The toxic theology is, again, where deliberate encouragement of separatism, that you have to join our club, and that if you want to have the unconditional acceptance and ultimate, the unconditional, you could say, repentance and reformation, you have to join. We are the chosen ones, and that there is no way except through our way. Then what that does is that creates an approach where do not talk to everyone. It actively encourages separatism. Don't listen to any scholars unless they're approved. Don't read any books unless we do it. They become the only conduit for the understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah, which becomes even more and more narrower, to the extent this ghulu, this extremism, and Allah says in the Quran, don't go to extremes, came to a point where certain of these fringe elements would burn the books of scholars of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah because they objected with one of their principles, whether it was the books of Imam Nawawi or the books of Imam Ibn Hazm or whatever. They would literally burn their books. And this was called the Hadadiyah movement, because they said they found one objectionable thing within their books. Okay, then there would be a restriction to access to other forces of information. Okay, if you went outside of the group, you'd be threatened with excommunication, with takfir and tabdi. Okay, and all these people that say, oh, we don't make takfir, we don't declare you disbeliever, but they made you feel like a disbeliever. And they were the ones who gave you the tazkiyah, that you are a good Muslim or a bad Muslim, and these people are bad Muslims. So they became the individuals who determined who are the ones who are going to Jannah and who are the ones who are going to Jahannam. These are some elements. And then the psychological mind control techniques around isolation. Abu Tayyib, I've heard, can you believe it? There was a janazah, stories we've heard, janazah of a father and two sons, one who upon a ghulu was on extremism, would exclude his other brother from coming to the janazah of his father, saying, you are not upon Tawheed, astaghfirullah, not upon Tawheed, yeah? And then the followers would have these rigid, unyielding systems of belief, that you can only go through this channel. Everyone, that we are the only ones to explain the text. And it goes on and on. And we can go through all the many aspects of toxic theology.
It's disgusting. It really is. I mean, I'm just going to read a couple of comments and questions that are being put out there. So number one, Muslim BB says, the times you talk about sounds amazing. That's the 90s, unity. So what happened? It's very, very true. Those days were very, very good days. I really...
I'll answer that when you finish reading.
Inshallah, inshallah. I've got another one from Anonymous. There's been a new trend that Islam needs to be reformed What would you say about that? And what do you feel are the dangers of this concept? So let's deal with them two things, and then we'll read the rest of them later on, inshallah.
The first, let's deal with the second one first. There's been a new trend, and Islam's not in need of reforming. Allah told us in Surah Ma'idah, this day He has perfected His religion and chosen for you, us, Islam. What does need rectification, not reform, is our understanding and approach to implementing Islam as our Salaf did, because they spread Islam with Allah's permission across the globe. So what is it that we are not doing within the context of the 21st century across the world? What is it that has caused us to lose the position as leaders in science, in morals, in conduct? What is it that's caused us to lose that? There are some fundamental areas, and that's we are steeped in, let's say, dissonance from Tawheed. We just have to look at some of the Muslim practices across the world today. We are away from internal rectification on a huge scale. Many of us are just adhering or abiding by practical aspects of worship without inward rectification. There's an extreme inward rectification from some groups as well, and that's all they think that is necessary. The balance is not there. Ilyas and you both mentioned the verses about being balanced, and that we are ummatun wasat, and we're seeing that we're picking particular strands and aspects of the deen, and we're focusing on it. There should be a focus on Tawheed, but it shouldn't be a focus where we become in a state of paralysis, that the same book is being taught over the 20, 30 years without actualizing that concept of Tawheed, those concepts of Tawheed within our daily lives and within society. Tawheed moved and established the first Islamic state in this world. Tawheed, the actualization, the knowledge and the actualization of Tawheed based upon the prophetic model. So we have everything there. Islam is not in need of reform. And also we've got to move from being apologetic. We've got Muslims who are apologists, and in their in that apologetic strategy, there's the dilution of our faith. And these are problems. So I think the individual who raised that is a really good question. No, Islam is not in need of reform. It's being perfected. It's us who are far from perfection, and we need to really come upon that. And yes, the verse there, Surah Ma'idah, verse 3, ayat 3, we need to keep that in mind. If it's being perfected, we're the ones falling short. So we need
it comes as essentially it's basically an inferiority complex that some Muslims have, that they feel like they have to reform this. And I think we need to get out of that mindset and understand, have some izzah, some honor in this religion that Allah's bestowed upon us. So there's a number of factors. Obviously, that's just one element. But Sheikh Ilyas, tell us.
Abu Tayyib, I was just about to say this verse that I always mention when I'm asked this question. وَلَا تَحِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ, which is exactly about that inferiority complex. Do not fear, do not grieve, do not have inferiority complex or identity conflict. You will be successful in kuntum mu'minin if you are a believer. Now, this is at the heart of the issue. The word Islam doesn't need reform. It does need revival. And as the great words of Imam Malik rahimahullah, nothing will revive the latter part of the ummah, the Khalaf, except revive the first part of the ummah, the Salaf. What made the Sahaba become khayru ummat ukhrijat nas, the greatest nation raised up for mankind, was the perfection, al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum, the perfection of deen through the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in their time. Why do we need to reform Islam when Islam came with rights, the likes of which had not been seen in societies until just in the last 20, 30, even 40, 50 years? And it started off with the most, like I said, groundbreaking, transformational change for all societies on a global level, that established societies which were unprecedented in terms of social justice, in terms of the quality and character of the people in those societies. It started off with excellence, and we fell from grace as our own movement described from the 90s up until now, we fell from grace, as we fell from our core principles, and maintaining the purity of our hearts upon the methodology. And this is the story. Before that verse, Allah says, قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ سُنَنًا فَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ. Travel through the land, look at the people who were mighty before you, and look what became of their societies, because they denied the ayat of Allah. This is a reminder of falling from grace. And we...
Can I... Ilyas, I think in fact, and maybe you were all in that lecture that many years ago, and I often exhort it upon brothers, sisters that I speak to. But I remember in one of the conferences, one of the sheikhs gave an analogy of people gathering and moving and settling by a river, by a pure stream. And what happened is that they got their strength from that particular stream. They would get their fish, their food, they'd take the water for drinking and for their food and everything. But then what happened is the next generation that came didn't appreciate the purity of this water and started throwing their pollutants in there. And they were eating from it and throwing their pollutants. So they became sick. And what actually happened is that the enemies who were, and those who wanted the river, they wanted the stream, they came and overpowered, occupied and dominated them. Now that went on for a while. And so three groups emerged from those original people who had settled there. And one group said, we need to build hospitals because then we will get better, and that's the solution. And some said, no, that's not the solution, because you'll get better and then you'll become weak again. We haven't removed the symptom, the problem, sorry. The other group, the second group, said, no, we need to fight and overpower and defeat our enemies who have occupied us. The third group said, neither of these are going to work. We need to go back to the source of the problem, which is to purify the river, purify it, then we will gain our strength back, then we will be able to overcome our enemies. And this first group, we will talk about names, had the Muslim Brotherhood type of ideology. That politicized understanding, hospitals, do this for the people, that they will support us, this is how we will rise up and everything. The second group were what we see these extremists, Daesh and everyone else doing, and with the Khariji extremist ideology. Let's fight and destroy, let's go for the head, and if we do that, then we will get our strength. The third group were the people of Sunnah, which is the majority, if we're talking Ahlus Sunnah, and specifically the Salafis, who said, no, we need to purify the water. We need to purify the stream, not putting pollutants back in there, so that we can derive that pure strength. That water, that river, that stream is Tawheed.
Yeah, absolutely. That's you're going back. We're going back to memory lane there again, brother. That's an old lecture. I
think that's 1997.
Yeah, man.
That's right. See, we all remember that, subhanAllah.
It is a great story. It's a great story. It's a great metaphor. Purify the source of your knowledge and guidance. Go back to that pure prophetic guidance. That's what we've got to do. You know, the Prophet ﷺ said, you know, Sallallahu alayhi dhillah, humiliation is upon you, and he's not going to hatta tarju ila dinikum, until you come back to your religion. And it is really as simple as that. And what we have is exactly reaction.
There's an important caveat, because we also see, I think Abu Tayyid, you mentioned about the internecine disputes and the way, even the younger generation. And with social media, we've seen that increase in hatred and vitriol being passed between Muslims against each other. Now, we also made similar mistakes when we were growing as Salafis. Not to that extent, though, not to where it's got to now, and not to the extent where some of these Salafi cults have made that. But one thing we need to remember as well when we're putting things in balance, and I say this in some of my previous sermons, and I know that Ilyas has said that, the individuals who we find who are opponents, and especially those who are have that belief, they love they are sincere in loving the Muslim community. They hate to see the atrocities that are being committed abroad, Syria and elsewhere, and so their distorted understanding takes them to this violent extremist takfiri ideology. The reason why Ilyas, myself, you, us brothers, we are opposing them, and even other elements of extremism is, as Ali radiallahu anhu said when he was asked about the Khawarij, one of the final questions he was asked, then what are they, O believer of the faithful? After he said, are they disbelievers? Are they munafiqun? Are they? And he said no to all of those. They run from shirk. They do this. They do that. So what are they then, O Amir al-Mu'mineen? He said they're our brothers in faith, but we are fighting them for because they opposed us and they fought us, and we are fighting them because of that. One of the things we find from co-religionists is the condemnation of those who are of other groups and hatred. An individual died recently who was Salafi, was on the Sunnah from London, and he was at one stage with the cult. And if you see the messages that came out from the cult, there was nothing in Rahimahullah or may Allah grant him Jannah and his family, nothing. There was silence. You can hear the tumbleweed, okay? And then there was a tweet where a sister asked, was he Salafi? And one individual who knew him very well said, cannot affirm, cannot deny. This is excessiveness, okay? If someone is not from your ideological persuasion, your religious understanding, and they are Muslim, they are our brothers and our sisters, and we've got to show rahmah and mercy to them. And I know some of my opponents, and let's be frank, I've had individuals who have shown their disdain and dislike, and I've met them face to face in rooms, and we've come out of there both having a better understanding, both understanding and seeing, hold on, the two people here who vehemently oppose each other have the same love for the deen.
Alhamdulillah.
So how can you hate each other to the extent that we're not permitted to? We hate for Allah. Clearly we hate for Allah. But we have to understand what that entails. What does that mean? And what we're seeing amongst the Muslim communities at the moment, and Salafis are responsible for that. And I'll quickly say this before I let Ilyas jump in. Salafism, Salafiyah, is Islam and is correct. Salafis, we have got some problems in sorting that out and adhering to Salafiyah as it should be adhered to. So please, listeners who have had problems with Salafis, yes, we have problems in our manners, in our approach. Some of us with our disdain and our haughtiness, not our generation now. But that's not Salafiyah. That is not Islam. So, like people say, the Muslims, Islam is a barbaric religion, and they look at the Muslims. We say, no, don't look at the mistakes of the Muslims. Look at Islam, and therein you will see perfection in every aspect. In the same way, Salafiyah is correct. The methodological approach, the monotheism, and the Tawheed, and the understanding regarding Tawheed. But Salafis, we have some dissonance in aspects of that because of our own limitations and shortcomings.
Yeah, I think there's a comment which is related exactly to what you've just mentioned there, AbdulHaq. Muslim BB says Salafis get a bad name because it's always associated with refutations, and there's some truth in that statement actually. Certainly for some Salafis anyway, for sure, because many of us grew out of that, many of us moved on from that, and like I said, these were the mistakes that we made in the 90s as part of our overzealousness. But unfortunately, you've got some of the young brothers who are going through that same motion again, like we went through. We grew out of it. We matured. We got more knowledge, and we moved on from that. And that's not to say refutations don't have a place in the deen. They do. There certainly is a space for that, but it's not the whole of the deen. That's the point. The way
we come back again, Abu Taib. And the scholars who they refer to have said the same thing, and we refer to, in actuality, this refutation is not for everyone. And the individuals who are getting involved in this, they've found a niche where they can let out frustrations, disparage, and everything like that. As you said, as Ilyas gave the example of one brother saying another brother cannot come. There's another account of an individual who's forever regretful now that he didn't attend his mother's janazah because he said she was not Salafi. She was not on the Sunnah. Years later, now that he's grown out of that very idealistic and overzealous stage, he's a broken individual. He's a broken individual. This is his mother. We know about relationships with mothers. You have Muslim mothers, mashallah, tabarakallah, and traditionally and everything. I unfortunately, I hope my mum comes to Islam, but I don't know that reality. For that to be taking place, something is wrong. And when you're throwing narrations, Tuba lil Ghuraba, is that the understanding? No, it's not. That's not the correct understanding. When you've got individuals instilling in you resentment and haughtiness and hatred in the messages that they're pumping out regarding other Muslims, you need to check that. Why have you got that resentment for co-religionists in that particular way? Why? Where is that coming from? What precedent are you following within the correct context? Because you'll find someone say, no, Ali Madini, this one, whatever. What was their context? And which scholar precedes you in saying you can do that now within the context of the society that we're living in?
You know, just building on what AbdulHaq's saying, you know, this is the amazing thing. You know, our teachers, and the big three of our teachers were Sheikh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, Sheikh Ibn Baz, and Sheikh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. Our teachers were upon wasitiyya, upon the balance race. The sad reality was the conduits between the teacher and us as the ordinary people at that time were manipulating, were exploiting, were distorting and adding, I call it their own little perspective on it. And they also put themselves as the gatekeepers towards the scholars, and they wouldn't allow us access sometimes to individuals to ask direct questions. As AbdulHaq mentioned, Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah, and this is in his rihla, which is his kind of works around his conversations and his fatwas and his statements. He was asked one day about, can we seek the forgiveness of a particular individual? I'm not going to get in, because if I mention the individual, we'll go to a big debate. Can we seek this particular forgiveness for this particular individual who was regarded by some of those Muslims as a mubtadi, as an innovator? And then Sheikh Al-Albani mentioned the verse in the Quran, رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَ بِالْإِيمَانِ وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. He says, oh Allah, forgive our brothers, sabakuna bil iman, who preceded us in iman, and do not put in our hearts any bad feeling towards them. And that's it, he mentioned it. And then the person, and this is typical of that kind of Salafiyya, but continue to make what we call imtihan, and ask another question, and twist another question, and bowl another googly, as it were, to try to twist the situation. But he's this and he's that. And Sheikh Al-Albani continued, rahimahullah, to say, رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَ بِالْإِيمَانِ. Seek forgiveness for your brother, seek forgiveness for your... Because what he's getting him to say, is this person a kafir, na'udhu billah? Are you making takfir of this person that you're not going to seek it? Allah obligated you in the Quran. رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَ بِالْإِيمَانِ, to seek the forgiveness of your Muslim brother, irrespective, and not to have any bad feeling in your heart. So our teachers, you know, may Allah Ta'ala, inshallah, unite us with them in the next world, Ameen, and give them the highest position. They were upon the wasitiyya. They were upon such balance, and their manners were exquisite, and their compassion for the ummah was great. And we have maligned them because this distorted, corrupted, harsh, this shiddah, you know, of this Salafiyya, as the Prophet said, yassiru wa la tasiru, okay, bashiru wa la tunafiru, make it easy, don't make it difficult, don't have this shiddah, this harshness, which they would say have rifq of Ahl Sunnah, softness towards people. And yet these brothers were so condemnatory. And you know where it came from, Abu Tayyib? It came from an inferiority complex as well. It came from a psychological mentality that I've been battered all my life. Now I can batter other people. I've got a stick of Sunnah to beat people with, rather than a source of guidance to enlighten people with, to open their hearts towards the Sunnah. It became a stick to beat people, to show, oh, look what we can do. And it became about power, control, influence, and all of these other things. So this is, again, another sad reality of how the toxicity came in and the fracturing came in. One of the things I just wanted to finish, and then I'll hand it over to AbdulHaq, which is this. You know, I was always questioning the mentality when brothers were saying, we are the only people on the face of the earth who are Firqatul Najiyah, the safe sect. We are the only people on the face of the earth who are Ta'ifatul Mansura, the group aided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are the only people on the face of the earth who are Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And I thought, what about all the other Muslims? And we were actively encouraged sometimes to have animosity and separate. And it can't be like that. This is not the way. of Islam and the way of the Sunnah. And so why we're having this discussion is exactly that. We want people to come back to this really balanced Salafiyah, which is the way of our scholars and the way of our teachers, not just in the contemporary area. For 1400 years, you find that this balance was there, and this love and compassion and this manners of different adab al-khilaf. It's very sad. People talk about refutation, rad, okay, rududiyya, you know, this person, we got to put them down, refute them and humiliate them. It's not rad, it's not refutation, because refutation, as you said, is from our religion. To correct ideas is from our religion. This wasn't about refutation, this was about humiliation. And this is about a tribal mentality. It was a tribal mentality that, you know, and it was gangs. It's just gangs. Oh, we're going to smash them. We're going to deal with them, etc., etc. That's what it's about. Whereas refutation is with love and mercy to correct people's ideas. And it's done in privacy, by the way. And it's done with adab and akhlaq. It's not done. So adab al-khilaf, which is the manners of differing. And this is a sad reality. Most of the issues that the people on Salafiyah divided upon were the issues which were permissible, which we'll call them, you know, ikhtilaf al-mana. They were the permissible differing issues. They were not upon
it was the issues of the furu'at, which there is room for, you know, genuine ikhtilaf as well. Yes. And this is where the problem that I have sometimes, where there is genuine ikhtilaf, regardless of my own personal viewpoint, and I might hold the more stricter viewpoint on that. But if there is genuine ikhtilaf, there has to be room for people to come to the evidences and come to those conclusions based upon the evidences. And it's one of the points I want to pick up on that you mentioned about those three great giants in scholarship. Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah, just because there's a comment here which says, Muslim BB mentions, I've never understood this. The deen is so easy to follow, so why do people go to extreme? And I want to mention this point, that because, you know, there are different types of extremes. We didn't get to the point of the extreme of the Khawarij that I wanted to talk about, but maybe on another show, but I think another session. But the point I want to make here is that Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah built his whole, he taught us the principles, and this is the important point, the principles of being from the people of evidence, from the people of, you know, tasfiyah wa tarbiyah, was how we purified, you know, and then built upon. People want to do the tasfiyah part, and usually with harshness, right? Meaning purify the shirk and the bid'ah, and rightly so, but with the right manners and approach is what was missing. And then they forget about the time, because once you purified all of that, then now you've got to build on that. You've got to build people upon the sunnah. You've got to build people upon tawheed. And I think the problem was the approach that was used by many people in the 90s and some of the youth today is they haven't understood what Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah was actually trying to do. Because, you know, in our ummah, yes, the brother is right. The deen is so easy to follow. So why do people go to extremes? And partly because we're ignorant, or the masses are ignorant. Partly because we follow, you know, we fall into shirk. And AbdulHaq touched upon this earlier on. If you look at the ummah, we're engrossed in shirk. We're engrossed in innovations of the religion. We've moved away from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. This is why we have those inferiority complexes today, that people want to reform, right, in quotation marks, the religion. But Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah said, no, tasfiyah, no matter what the thing is that is incorrect from the aqidah, from the practices that Muslims have, purify that, remove the shirk, remove the bid'at, and then move to the tarbiyah stage, build upon. Once you've removed it, build people up, teach them through knowledge, through manners, the sunnah, tawheed, the beautiful things about our religion, like we talk about the diversity that we have. So these are some of the things I just want to highlight this, that yes, we've been bashing some of the Salafis who have gone to this cultish tendencies and things like that. I think it's important that we also clarify what Salafiyah actually is for those who don't know. I think it's very important to show that Salafiyah is the balanced way when it's done properly. Yeah. So AbdulHaq, this is over to you now, my brother.
Yeah, I will talk. I'm going to say what brought me to Salafiyah when I embraced the deen. And we didn't know it was called Salafiyah in the first few months or whatever, but should learn shortly afterwards. It was the adherence and firm adherence to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that encapsulating of Tawheed, monotheism, and without any allegorical explanations regarding Allah's names and attributes, as he has described them, and without anthropomorphism either, likening him to his creation. This is so. It was between those two. Allah's attributes are Allah's alone, and He cannot. Laysa kamithlihi shay. There's no. He's like unto nothing, and this is why I said nothing's like unto Him. And this is why Surah Ikhlas was one of my favorite, and is my favorite surah, because it represents a third of the Quran, but that pure monotheism that emanates throughout the Quran and is encapsulated in Surah Ikhlas and Surah Fatiha. Actually, this Tawheed is something to be cherished, preserved, and wherein lies the success of every individual soul and every society. That's the one thing. Also, the methodology and the approach to authenticity, to extrapolating authenticity, in order for us to adhere and properly practice and understand this deen, is something that is peculiar to authentic Orthodox Islam as Salafiyah presents it. And the influence is being acknowledged by academics, Muslim academics who are not Salafi, even to up until now, with the movement of Salafiyah in the 90s, particularly. We saw many different brands or strands of Muslim groups going back to authenticity now. When you see Sufi elements now referring to authentic hadith, when you see them looking at the methodology of implementing particular things, this by and large, that's now called the traditional Islam movement. That emerged as a result of them countering or trying to counter that Salafiyah wasn't the only ones, that movement that referred to that. So for me, Salafiyah, this is what, let's look at it linguistically as well. It's to refer to the Salaf. The Salaf, as we understand in Islam, are the first three generations. خير الناس قرني ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم. The best of my generation is the best of generations is my generation. The Prophet ﷺ said. Then those who follow me, they follow them, and those who follow them, and then those who are upon that way of the first three generations. This is the Salaf. Salafis subscribe to this. However, we fall very short in many instances with our behavior, because we were to look at the behavior of the Salaf, and we're not going to start quoting Barbahari, Shara Sunnah, which is one of the Salaf, but this is being used by some to beat others over the head because of the directives and the very firm language that's in there. It's a great book, mashallah, tabarakallah, to be taught by those who used to teach us, like Sheikh Ahmed Dahi Awais, not just a layman like you and me who don't understand and have not actualized those concepts in the book. So it's to follow and adhere to those first three generations, and it's the dissemination of authenticity, that approach to authenticity, authentic knowledge, in order to implement that practically in our lives. So I know I've gone a bit academic in that particular instance. I want to hand it to Ilyas as well to provide more of the religious references around that. But that is Salafiyah. What we're seeing from some of us today is a hybridization, or I like to use the term, a bastardization of that particular of elements of Salafiyah, because we have not grasped its reality and its meaning properly. Every Muslim will agree to referencing the first three generations. Every Muslim. Is that to now put us all in the same basket and say, oh, we're all Salafi? There's a step further in how we apply that knowledge, how we come to the Quran with regards to Tawheed. Are we likening Allah to His creation? Are we saying that Allah's hands represent power, as some of the more deviated groups did, without any referencing from there? Are we making explanations that were not there and not understood by the Sahaba and the succeeding generations? If we are, then we cannot say that we're adhering to Salafiyah, to Salafism, and that we are Salafi in a general sense or a specific sense. How are we approaching that knowledge? Once we approach it according to the methodological precepts that have been laid down by our Salaf, by our scholars, then we are within that very broad but authentic parameter of Salafiyah.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah. And you know, just to build on what AbdulHaq saying, you know, if I'm going to build a house, I'm going to build it upon the strongest foundation. I'm going to build it upon foundations which are unshakable, unmovable, which will defy all of the forces of nature. I'm not going to build it upon shaky ground. I'm not going to build it on sand. I'm not going to build it on a flood zone or whatever. I'm going to build it on the solid foundation. And the most solid foundation is return to the best nation. The nation of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba, as AbdulHaq said, he said the best ummah is my ummah, then the one that follows it, then the follows it. And he said that when he refers to the saved group, me and that which I and my companions are upon. And you know, I can reference it. When I want to learn the religion of Islam, and that includes the Aqidah, the Ibadat, the Usul, the Ulum, the principles, and the manners, and the conduct, and the whole framework of how I understand the religion, I'm going to take the safest approach. I can experiment with other methodologies and manhajis, but they're shaky. So I'm going to focus on the most secure foundation. And what is that secure foundation? Ibn al-Qayyim said, Shahidu tanzim wa shahidu min hadi rasulih al-karim. I want to base it on the people who witnessed the revelation, saw the verses coming down to the Prophet ﷺ as he received the wahi. And they witnessed shahidu min hadi rasulih al-karim, and they witnessed the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ. And when the revelation came to them, he explained it to them. This is what Imam Malik called mu'atta, the beaten track of Sahaba. You go through a field, you see there's a path that's been made by the people who walk along the path of wisdom and knowledge, and the people have gone before you. Don't go off the beaten track, basically what Imam Malik was saying. And Allah even makes it even clearer in Surah An-Nisa. وَمَن يُشَاكِكِ الرَّسُولِ مِن بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ الْهُدَى وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ نُوَلِّهِ مَا تَوَلَّى وَنُصْلِهِ جَهَنَّمَ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. Whoever differs with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and follows وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, follows a path other than of the believers. Now, why is it Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran? What is the wisdom of Allah Ta'ala saying in the Quran? Differ with the Messenger, following the path other than that of the believers. Why is that? What does that mean? It means basically this: the path Sabil al-Mu'minina is in congruence, in agreement with the way and the manhaj of the Prophet ﷺ. Who is this group? This is the Sahaba radiallahu anhuma. This is the Salaf as-Salih. فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي وَسُنَّةِ خُلَفَاءِ رَاشِدِينَ الْمَهْدِيِّينَ, the way of the Khulafa and the way of the Sahaba and the best of the people. And if you leave this path, Allah says, we'll leave you upon the path you have chosen, we'll land you in hell, what an evil refuge. And then Allah, another occasion, the Prophet ﷺ, he drew lines in the sand. He said, this is my straight path. And then he drew divergent paths. You know, this is, you know, in the sand as a physical demonstration. They are going away from the path that I have drawn. And then he says, وَأَنَّ هَذَا صِرَاطِ مُسْتَقِيمًا فَاتَّبِعُوا وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا السُّبُلَ فَتَفَرَّقَ بِكُمْ عَنْ سَبِيلِهِ ذَلِكُمْ وَسَّاكُمْ بِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, which is in Surah Al-An'am. And here Allah Ta'ala says, and verily this is my straight path. Follow it. Do not follow the paths of divergence. They will mislead you from the path of Allah. This He has ordered you so that you become muttaqin. So the point we're making here is this: very simply, the safest foundation, the strongest rope, safety rope around my waist, the strongest safety net for me to fall in is the net of following the sunnah upon the example of the first and the best generation who walked around. And if that is your description, alhamdulillah, we are not the extremists who say, no, you can't come into our club unless you allow you. If that is your manhaj, and look, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, we mentioned the first verse, which is in verse number 3, which is Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. Then Allah Ta'ala later on in Surah Al-Ma'idah mentions لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا. We gave every nation a sharia, a law, and a manhaj, which means a way to the law. So it was explaining this verse, that before this verse came down, the people could choose any methodology. But when Allah Ta'ala says there's one manhaj, there's one methodology, kitab, upon the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, upon the fahm, the understanding of the best, khayri ummat ukhrijat lin-nas, the best nation. And that's what we want to call humanity to. And they are the greatest nation. And this is where you're going to find the most unity. And what we had in the 90s was that. The simple methodology, Quran and Sunnah upon the Sahaba, and not falling into other people's agendas, other people's political agendas, other people's empire building, other people's hizbiyah, drinking from the pure water of the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the scholars of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah are exactly that. They are the scholars who call you to that solid foundation, which will never break. This is فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْأُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى, the trustworthy handle which will never break, alhamdulillah. And that is why we, AbdulHaq and I, are so passionate. The term Salafiyah is so maligned today, But I still call myself Salafi for the simple reason, because we are attributing ourselves to the true manhaj of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we are not doing it in a way. We have to reclaim it from the extremists. We have to reclaim it from the ghulu. It's a hijack, and it was hijacked deliberately to malign the scholars of Ahl Sunnah. And again, a lot of the people who advocated these ideas, who would then attribute and use the names of various scholars, both classical and contemporary, they have completely maligned them, and they have distorted their legacies. Okay, people who devoted their whole lives to the study of Al-Islam. And you know, look, one of the books I love, I'm devoted to, is Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, the Imam of Damascus, the Imam of Sunnah. And to show his love of Sunnah, he wrote the book Sharh Muslim, the explanation of the whole of Sahih Muslim. He did the explanation of every single hadith. He happened to have various aspects of Ash'ira in his Aqidah. Why? Because in his environment, that was the Aqidah which was predominant in some of the... Does that mean that he's not from Ahl Sunnah and from the... Because the scholars, they don't say that Imam Nawawi is out. Rather, manhaj, Quran, Sunnah upon the fahm of the Sahaba. And he stuck to this, and it's testament to every single one of his works, which are what? Quran, Sunnah, Quran, Sunnah, Quran, Sunnah. Even though there was some issues and elements of it. And this is ghulu as well. You can go to every single scholar, okay, in the last 1441 years, and no doubt you will find some point of issue which you... Is this what Islam has become? This is extremism, when you look deliberately for faults to malign, to distort. And, you know, Sheikh AbdulHaq has mentioned, you know, this isn't just amongst the Salafiyah. I see amongst all of the methodology. Deobandis have it, Ikhwan have it, Sufis have it. They've got their infighting, they've got their Hizbiyah, they've got their tribalism, they've got their, you know, like I said, own rivalries as well, and their own elements where there are some people who are balanced and they try to stay upon Sunnah, and other people who go to extremes as well. So it's not unique here at all. But I'm concerned about my community. I'm really concerned about them and the future of our community. People are dropping out because of how it's been maligned.
Absolutely. I think there's some powerful words then. There's plenty of principles that we can take from that, inshallah. And I think, you know what, we didn't even get a chance to talk about the other forms of extremism, the Khawarij, the Jihadis, Takfiris, the liberals. We didn't even get to touch upon that. We got so caught up on walking down memory lane. Yeah, we focused on the Salafiyya aspect, but maybe I think we definitely have to do another session on this, just to talk about the other forms of extremism and the challenges that we face and how we deal with that as well. So, and I know we've gone a little bit over time, so I want to just say Jazakallah khair, both.
Before we conclude, I think what you said is it's true. We were unable to speak about these other aspects, but what I want the audience, the listener, the viewer to understand is that us here now, we have gone through and we continue to go through a period of introspection. Why? Because we've reached a stage where we understand and comprehend and can contextualize. I'm living here in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. I refer to some of the scholars here. I go to their homes. I say, "What's your Abbas, Hafizahullah," and you get to actualize by looking at how they conduct themselves within this society. And when we're living in a society that's away from scholars, we live more in an abstract context, and therefore we misapply many aspects of what we're supposed to be adhering to, and we think that that's right. Now, that introspection that we are having as Salafis, we want to share with others. I'm not apologetic. Like Ilyas, I use the term Salafi, my academia, everyone, when I'm speaking. I won't shed that name. There has been a misappropriation of the name and a misapplication of the name. And that misappropriation from the extremists is because they can see the effectiveness and the efficacy of Salafiyya and its popularity across the world because of its authenticity. So they're like, let's join, like we've seen Ahl al-Bidah do over the centuries. They called themselves Ahl al-Sunnah. When Ahl al-Sunnah distinguished themselves from them, they called them, and became Ahl al-Athar. They called themselves that. They kept adopting and more trying to appropriate the names of the people of Sunnah to blend in because of their popularity, the strength of the people of Sunnah. This has happened with Salafiyah at the moment, and this is why you're hearing or seeing the confusion amongst wider non-Muslim society, the wider Muslim communities of Salafis are this, they're into extremism, they're into that, they're into that. There may be elements of a subjectivity with behavioral extremism, which is subjective. Oh, they wear the niqab. In one society, it's considered extreme. He grows the beard long. In another society, it's considered, that's subjective. But ideological extremism, which underpins the takfiri, khariji methodology, no, Salafis are far from that. That typology of Salafi jihadi, Salafi politico, no, we reject that. There's Salafiyah, Wasatiyah, and amongst us, within us, we're not hegemonic, we're not a hegemony, we're not a one solid unit base. There are problems amongst us, and we are highlighting that, not to say there's an issue with us, but we are looking at getting our own houses and homes in order and saying to the wider community, we are part of you. We are intrinsic to you. We are upon a socio-religious orthodoxy that you should appreciate, because we will not allow our religion, our faith, what we stand for, what it represents, to be diluted in any shape or form. That's not going to happen from the liberal perspective. Neither is it going to be driven and polarized to a violent extreme perspective where individuals think this is Salafiyah, this dogmatic rejecting of all others methodology is Salafi. We are neither, as Alyas said from the outset, as you'd highlighted from the outset, we are in the middle of both of those extremes. That is who we are, but we're, again, to repeat, getting our house in order by bringing this to our Muslim brothers and sisters widely. Not just, oh, don't talk about Salafis in a bad way because you can't weaken us by bringing it. No, no, no. We are one Muslim community as an ummah. And we need to say to you, we've made mistakes. We've got others making the same mistakes. And we're going to highlight those mistakes because that's not Salafiyah. They may be Salafi, but that's not Salafiyah.
Absolutely. And I think there's a couple of comments that have come on my private Facebook by one of our sisters, one of our aunties. Essentially, she's become an IDC supporter. Honestly, may Allah reward her and her family. This is a beautiful way to finish off this show because she's been watching every show every night, yeah. And this one, she got some inspiring words from what we've just been talking about. She said, "I was born Muslim, but in 2007, something beautiful happened to me. It all started with a sincere heart, and I want to teach others what I know. This is not for show. This is real, and want to at least give you some information for Hidayah. Just know that we are humans, and human in Arabic means insan. And the very way to be to insan is yansa, which means we forget. Humans forget, so we need all to get our reminders from the Quran and the Hadith. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, if you want me to love you, then follow Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam." Alhamdulillah. What a beautiful way to finish off the show. Basically sum up everything that we've been talking about, you know, and I think she's just put another one on there. We do not worship what is outside the Quran or Hadith. We only obey Quran and Sunnah, as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in the last sermon. Yes, we are one ummah, and if there are differences, you say and back to Allah and we return for judgment. So this is basically essentially sums it up nicely what we've been talking about. And I think honestly it's a pleasure.
Please, can I just please make a final point? Yeah.
Go for it.
You know, some brothers, they get a bit tired and they say, Alyas, although I cover different things in my khutbah on Fridays, they say, why do you say the same thing every week? And I just tell them, because for 1441 years, the people of Sunnah have said the same thing every week.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to, of course, I talk about topical issues and other things as well. I am not going to deviate from that path. That's why. Because you know what? We have to hold on to this. In the next 10 years, there's a massive challenge with new atheism as people are dropping out left, right, and center. I've got to keep on till my last breath. May Allah Ta'ala enable all of us till our last breath. Keep calling people to the Quran and the Sunnah, inshallah. Ameen.
Yeah, absolutely. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khair, brothers. We definitely have to do this again, right? We'll have to do another session, inshallah, to dig a bit more deeper in some of the other areas. But it was a pleasure having you both on. As always, Alyas, my brother, you know, love you for the sake of Allah. You too, my older brother, AbdulHaq. Love you for the sake of Allah. we're gonna do this again, inshallah. So time. We'll be back tomorrow. Who have we got tomorrow? We've got another show tomorrow with it's gonna be the 27th night late show special. We've got Abu Ibrahim Silva, who's our Portuguese brother who's currently in Medina. Ustad Khalid Barry is back with us tomorrow, and Sheikh Muhammad Talawan is with us. So we're going to have a 27th night special at 11 p.m. Through to 2 a.m. inshallah. So make sure everybody tunes in for that, and we're going to be talking about Islam in the West. So that's the topic of tomorrow's show. So Jazakumullah khair, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Back at all.